My parents think my sick aunt is going to leave them everything when she dies and are pressuring her to change the will, but they didn't know her chaotic secret that will change everything. I was 10 when Aunt Julie showed up at our door. She was completely bald and skinnier than I'd ever seen her. I have stage 3 lymphoma, she said. Can I stay here for a while? She was crying and looked like she was about to faint, but my parents just gave her an annoyed look. But then suddenly, they exchanged glances like they were thinking the exact same thing and turned to Julie before telling her they'd love to take her in and that they'd be there for every step of her journey. At first, they kept their word. All the attention was on her. The dinner table was filled with questions about chemo, support group recommendations, mom bringing what she found online from survivors. Julie seemed so happy and loved, she looked like she was gonna explode. But then, not even 3 weeks in, things changed. Mom started complaining about how Julie's medical appointments disrupted her book club schedule. Dad began taking his dinner to his study because he said being around Julie made him too sad to eat. They moved her to the guest room in the basement and started leaving her meals on a tray outside her door like she had something contagious. Don't spend too much time with her, Mom told me one morning while packing my lunch. She won't be here long and I don't want you getting too attached. When I asked why they were being so mean to someone who was sick, Dad said something that made my stomach twist. Only bad people get sick. She must have done something terrible to deserve this. But Julie wasn't bad at all. When my parents went to bed, she'd sneak upstairs and play board games with me. She helped me with my math homework that Mom was always too busy to look at. This wasn't the weird part though. The weird part was that my parents kept telling me that Julie would die soon, almost as if they were convincing me or manifesting it. But what they said didn't seem true. Julie looked to be getting better. Her cheeks got fuller and she stopped looking so tired all the time. She even joked once that she felt suspiciously healthy for someone who's supposed to be dying, but I didn't really get what she meant. Everything changed when these older kids started picking on me during my walk to school. They'd throw rocks and call me names and I was terrified. I begged Mom to walk me, but she said that was her yoga time and she couldn't miss it. Dad needed his quiet time in the break room before work started, so he couldn't do it either. I thought I'd have to face the bullies alone, until one morning Julie appeared at the front door fully dressed. Sick or not, nobody messes with you, she said. The walk was long, but she didn't care. And what's great is that the bullies took one look at the pale bald woman marching toward them and scattered. After that, Julie walked me every single morning and I noticed she got stronger and faster each day. Mom was furious when she stayed home one morning and found out Julie was walking me. You're too sick for this. Stop confusing her. She needs to prepare for you to die. I didn't even get a chance to defend Julie. I just saw her cry as they banned her from the family areas and told me she was just attention seeking with her illness. One night I couldn't sleep and went to get water. I found Julie crying at the kitchen table with Mom and Dad standing over her. There were papers everywhere and Mom was pointing at different documents. You need to be practical about this, Mom said. We'll have funeral costs. Think of Sarah's future, Dad added. That was my name. Private school isn't cheap. The least you can do is provide for the family that took you in. I realized what was happening. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Stop! I screamed, running into the kitchen. She's getting better. You just want her money. You tell me she's bad, but she's the only one who's nice to me. Mom grabbed my arm and dragged me to my room. She's poisoned you against us, she hissed before locking my door. Later that night, I heard softly knocking. Julie slipped inside and sat on my bed. She was shaking and tears were streaming down her face. I need to tell you something, she whispered. I told her secrets were safe with me before putting my hand on my heart. She looked at me like she was the proudest aunt in the world. I know this is a lot to tell you, but you're a big girl. You'll understand. My whole life, they've treated me like I don't exist. I had no birthdays, no gifts, no cake, and no chocolate, but my brothers did. When I was your age, I always thought that no matter what, they would never care about me. That's sad, I responded, confused but sad for her. So now that I'm all big and grown, I thought that maybe if I was dying, maybe they'd finally love me, even for a little bit. You're gonna die, I said too loud. She chuckled. No, sweetie, what I'm trying to say is, it's all fake. I don't have cancer. I'm not dying. I shaved my head and didn't eat so I could look like I have cancer. I wanted to see if they cared, but they don't. My eyes widened. That is so smart. Can I help you? I asked. Actually, you can. Julie explained her plan while sitting on my bed. She needed me to help convince my parents she was getting worse, not better. She said if they thought she was really dying, maybe they'd finally show some real emotion. I nodded eagerly, excited to be part of something important. She taught me what to say and how to act worried when they asked about her. We practiced me looking sad and concerned. Julie showed me how to make my voice shake a little when I talked about her being tired. It felt like we were putting on a play together. The next morning, I started our plan. At breakfast, I pushed my cereal around and told Mom I was worried about Julie. I said she seemed weaker yesterday and had trouble walking up the stairs. Mom's eyes lit up in this weird way that made me uncomfortable. She asked for more details and I gave her what Julie and I rehearsed. Dad lowered his newspaper and they exchanged another one of those looks. Mom patted my hand and said it was natural for sick people to decline. Her voice was gentle, but her smile was too big. Over the next few days, I kept dropping hints. I'd mentioned Julie coughing more or needing to rest after simple tasks. My parents ate it up. They started checking on her more, but not in a caring way. They'd peek into her room and nod to each other like they were confirming something. Mom even started humming while she cooked dinner. It was creepy how happy they seemed about Julie supposedly getting sicker. Julie played her part perfectly. She'd move slower when they were watching and lean on walls for support. She'd skip meals and make sure they saw the full tray outside her door. Sometimes she'd cough loudly when they walked past the basement. I helped by looking worried whenever they brought her up. We were a good team. At night, we'd meet in my room and plan the next day. Julie would tell me I was doing great and that made me feel special. But things started getting weird. My parents became pushier about those papers. They'd bring them to Julie multiple times a day. Mom would sit on her bed and talk about being responsible. Dad would stand in the doorway and mention my college fund. They weren't even trying to hide what they wanted anymore. Julie would cry and say she needed more time to think. They'd leave, but always came back. The pressure was constant. One afternoon, Mom pulled me aside. She said Julie was being selfish by not signing the papers. She explained that when people are dying, they should think about the living. Her grip on my shoulder was too tight. She said I needed to talk to Julie about doing the right thing. I nodded, but felt sick inside. That night, I told Julie what Mom said. Julie's face went pale and she hugged me tight. She whispered that she didn't know what to do anymore. The next week got worse. My parents started threatening Julie. They'd say things like how hard it must be to be sick and alone. They'd wonder out loud if she'd be more comfortable in a facility. Dad mentioned he knew a place that took terminal patients with no insurance. Mom added that of course family was better, but only if everyone cooperated. The threats were clear even if they smiled while making them. Julie started looking actually sick from the stress. I tried to help by telling my parents Julie seemed too weak to make big decisions, but that backfired. They just pushed harder, saying she needed to sign before she got too sick to be legally competent. They started bringing the papers to every interaction. Breakfast had papers, lunch had papers. Even when they brought her medicine, they'd slip documents underneath. Julie was trapped and so was I. One day I decided to document what was happening. I had this little camera I got for my birthday that Mom forgot about. It was pink and fit in my pocket. I started taking pictures of them pressuring Julie. I got one of Mom pointing at papers while Julie cried. Another showed Dad blocking the doorway while holding documents. I hid the camera in the garage after taking pictures each day. I thought maybe if someone saw them, they'd help us. But my parents found the camera in my room. I came home from school and Mom was sitting on my bed holding it. Her face was scary calm. She asked why I was taking pictures of family moments. I tried to lie, but she already knew. Dad appeared in my doorway and they both started yelling. They said I was ungrateful and that Julie had turned me against them. They took my camera and grounded me indefinitely. No TV, no games, no leaving my room except for school and meals. That night was terrible. I could hear them yelling at Julie through the vents. They accused her of manipulating me. They said she was using her fake illness to turn their daughter against them. Julie tried to explain, but they wouldn't listen. I heard her sobbing and things being thrown around. The next morning, Julie had a bruise on her arm she tried to hide with long sleeves. She wouldn't tell me what happened, but I knew. Julie decided to tell them the truth. She thought if they knew she she wasn't really sick, they'd stop the pressure about the papers. We planned it carefully. She'd reveal everything and apologize for lying. Maybe they'd be mad, but at least the insurance stuff would stop. I thought it was risky, but Julie was desperate. She couldn't take much more of their threats and manipulation. The confession didn't go how we planned. Julie sat them down and explained everything. She told them about faking the cancer and why she did it. She said she just wanted them to love her. She apologized over and over. But my parents weren't shocked or angry like we expected. They got this calculating look instead. Mom said Julie was clearly mentally unstable. Dad added that someone who would fake cancer couldn't be trusted. They twisted everything around. They used her confession against her. They told me Julie was dangerous and delusional. They said people who lie about being sick are capable of anything. Mom cried fake tears about how Julie had betrayed their trust. Dad said they'd tried to help her, but she was too far gone. They made me question everything. For a few days, I wasn't sure who to believe. Julie seemed so sad and defeated. My parents seemed so concerned and hurt. I was confused and scared, but then I saw them planning. They thought I was asleep, but I heard them talking. They said Julie's confession was perfect. Now if she tried to leave or tell anyone, they'd say she was crazy. Who would believe someone who faked cancer? They could keep her papers and say she wasn't mentally fit to make decisions. They laughed about how stupid Julie was for telling the truth. That's when I knew for sure who the real bad people were. I snuck down to see Julie that night. She was locked in the basement room. They'd put a padlock on the outside. I whispered through the door that I believed her and was sorry for doubting. She cried and said it wasn't my fault. She told me she was going to leave as soon as she could. She said she'd come back for me when she got settled. I believed her, but I was scared they'd never let her go. The next day, my parents acted like nothing was wrong. They made breakfast and talked about normal stuff. But Julie's tray sat outside the locked door getting cold. They'd only let her out for the bathroom, and even then Mom would stand guard. They told me Julie needed time to think about her behavior. They said it was for her own good. The house felt like a prison for both of us. At school, I tried to tell my teacher, Mrs. Henderson. She was always nice and seemed like someone who would help. I waited until after class and asked if I could talk to her. I told her about Julie being locked up and my parents being mean, but I was 10 and didn't explain it well. Mrs. Henderson looked concerned, but said family problems were complicated. She said she'd think about what to do, but nothing happened. Julie was still locked up when I got home. I felt hopeless, but then remembered our neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She lived next door and always waved when she walked her little dog. She'd given me cookies once when I helped her carry groceries. Maybe she would listen. I wrote her a note explaining everything. I drew pictures of the locked door and Julie crying. I folded it up tiny and stuck it in her mailbox when my parents weren't looking. Then I waited. Mrs. Chen knocked on our door the next day. I watched from the stairs as my parents answered. She said she was concerned about strange noises from our house. My parents turned on the charm immediately. Mom laughed and said Julie was going through a difficult time. Dad explained about her mental health issues and how they were trying to help. They invited Mrs. Chen in for coffee and cookies. By the time she left, she was apologizing for bothering them. My heart sank. That night, my parents were extra careful. They moved Julie's meals to random times so neighbors wouldn't notice patterns. They put weather stripping around her door to muffle sounds. They told me if I tried to tell anyone else, they'd send Julie away forever. Mom grabbed my face and made me look at her. She said Julie was sick in the head and needed their help. She said if I really loved my aunt, I'd stop making trouble. I nodded because I was scared, but I didn't stop thinking about how to help. Julie and I needed a better plan. During one of her bathroom breaks, I slipped her a note. It said we needed to escape together. She slipped me one back that said she was working on something. We couldn't talk much, but we passed notes when we could. She told me to be ready and to pack a small bag. I hid clothes and snacks under my bed. I also found some money in Dad's jacket and took it. I figured we'd need it more than he did. My parents must have sensed something. They got more paranoid and controlling. They put a lock on my window and took my backpack each day after school. They checked my pockets and searched my room. Mom started walking me to school instead of letting me go alone. She'd hold my hand too tight and remind me about being a good daughter. I smiled and agreed, but inside I was screaming. One morning, Julie's door was open. I ran downstairs, but she wasn't there. My parents were eating breakfast like normal. When I asked where she was, Mom said she went to a special hospital. Dad added it was for her own good. They said she'd be getting the help she needed. I knew they were lying, but I couldn't prove it. I cried and they sent me to school like nothing happened. Mrs. Henderson asked if I was okay, but I just shook my head. That afternoon, I found Julie in the basement. They'd moved her to the storage room with no windows. It was smaller and darker than her old room. She looked terrible and scared. She whispered they were planning something bad. She'd heard them on the phone with someone about power of attorney. She didn't know what that meant exactly, but knew it was about controlling her money. We held hands through the gap under the door. I decided to be smarter. I pretended to be the perfect daughter. I stopped asking about Julie and acted like I believed their lies. I helped with chores and smiled at dinner. It called me inside, but it worked. Slowly, they relaxed. They stopped searching my room and let me walk to school with other kids. Mom even praised me for being mature. Dad ruffled my hair and said he knew I'd come around. I wanted to throw up. Meanwhile, I was planning. I'd retrieved my camera from the garage where I'd originally hidden it. They forgot to look there after finding it in my room. I started recording again, but more carefully. I'd pretend to play in the basement and get video of Julie's locked door. I recorded them taking her food and not letting her out. I got audio of them discussing her money. The camera filled up with evidence. I just needed someone to show it to. I remembered Julie mentioning her brother Gabriel. She'd said he lived a few hours away and they hadn't talked in years. My parents never mentioned him, which seemed weird. I found an old address book in Mom's desk and looked him up. Gabriel was listed with a phone number. I memorized it and waited for my chance. It came when my parents went to their book club. They left me with strict instructions to stay in my room. Instead, I used the kitchen phone. Gabriel answered on the third ring. His voice sounded like Julie's, but deeper. I talked fast, explaining who I was and what was happening. I told him about the fake cancer and the real imprisonment. I said Julie needed help and my parents were bad people. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked for our address and said he'd handle it. He told me to be careful and act normal. I hung up feeling hopeful for the first time in weeks. The next few days were tense. I kept expecting Gabriel to show up, but nothing happened. My parents continued their routine. Julie stayed locked up. I started to worry I'd imagined the phone call or that Gabriel didn't believe me. Maybe he was like my parents and didn't care about Julie. I felt stupid for hoping, but I kept recording with my camera just in case. The memory card was almost full. Then Mrs. Chen showed up again, but this time she wasn't alone. A tall man with Julie's eyes stood beside her. It was Gabriel. My parents answered the door and their faces went white. Gabriel pushed past them and demanded to see Julie. Dad tried to say she wasn't there, but Gabriel wasn't buying it. He said he knew she was locked up and he had proof. Mrs. Chen held up her phone showing a video. It was one I'd taken of the locked door. I realized Mrs. Chen had found my camera. I'd hidden it in her garden while playing outside. She must have discovered it and watched the videos. She'd contacted Gabriel and shown him everything. My parents tried to lie and say the videos were fake. Mom accused Julie of being mentally ill. Dad threatened to call the police, but Gabriel just laughed. He said they could explain their crimes to the cops. The word crimes made them freeze. Gabriel found Julie and let her out. She collapsed in his arms, sobbing. She looked so small and fragile. He helped her upstairs while my parents followed, making excuses. They said they were protecting her from herself. They claimed she was dangerous and delusional. They even showed him the papers they wanted her to sign. Gabriel's face got darker with each word. He told them they were pathetic and cruel. He said he'd suspected something when I called, but the videos confirmed it. My parents turned on me then. Mom screamed that I'd betrayed them. Dad said I was an ungrateful brat who didn't understand adult matters. They blamed Julie for poisoning me against them. They said we'd regret this when Julie showed her true crazy colors, but their words didn't hurt anymore. I could see them clearly now. They were the sick ones, not Julie. They were so consumed by greed they'd lost their humanity. Gabriel called the police, but not to arrest anyone. He wanted a record of Julie's condition in the locked rooms. The officers took pictures and statements. My parents had to stand there while Julie explained everything. She told them about the fake illness and why she did it. She showed them the bruises and described the imprisonment. The cops looked disgusted, but said without more evidence it was a family dispute. Still, having a report helped. Julie packed her things while Gabriel watched my parents. The They tried more manipulation tactics. They cried about taking Julie in when she was sick. They mentioned all the money they'd spent on her food and shelter. They said she owed them for their kindness. Julie just kept packing. When they brought up the insurance papers, she finally spoke. She said they'd shown their true selves and she felt sorry for me having them as parents. That hit them where it hurt. They started yelling about parental rights and how they'd never let me go. Mom grabbed my arm and pulled me to her side. Dad stood between me and Julie like a guard. They said I was their daughter and would stay with them. Gabriel stepped forward and said that could be arranged through proper channels. He mentioned lawyers and custody evaluations. The threat made them back down a little. Julie knelt in front of me. She promised she wasn't abandoning me. She said she needed to get safe first, then she'd fight for me. She gave me a phone number and made me memorize it. She hugged me tight and whispered that she loved me. I told her I loved her too and understood. It was the hardest goodbye, but I knew she had to leave. Staying would have culled her spirit if not her body. After they left, the house felt empty. My parents raged for hours. They threw things and blamed each other. They blamed Julie and Gabriel and Mrs. Chen. They blamed me most of all. But eventually they tired out. They sent me to my room and I heard them talking. They were scared about what people would think. The police visit meant neighbors would gossip. Their reputation was everything to them. The next few weeks were strange. My parents tried to act normal, but the facade was cracking. People at church whispered when we walked by. Mom's book club friends stopped calling. Dad's coworkers asked uncomfortable questions. The story had spread despite their efforts to control it. They couldn't charm their way out of this one. The whole community knew something bad had happened at our house. They tried to win me back with gifts and treats. Mom bought me new clothes and toys. Dad offered to take me to the amusement park. They said they loved me and just wanted our family to be happy. But I saw through it. They wanted me to tell people everything was fine. They needed me to fix their reputation. I took the gifts but didn't give them what they wanted. I stayed quiet and distant. Julie called when they weren't home. She was staying with Gabriel and getting real help. Not for cancer, but for the trauma of our family. She said she was seeing a therapist and feeling stronger. She asked about me and I told her the truth. My parents were being fake nice, but I didn't trust them. She said to hang on and that she was working on something. Her voice sounded different, more confident. School became my escape. Mrs. Henderson kept a closer eye on me. She'd ask how things were at home and really listened to my answers. She let me eat lunch in her classroom when I didn't want to be around other kids. She never pushed, but I knew she was there. One day she slipped me a card with a phone number. She said it was for a counselor who helped kids in tough situations. I kept it hidden with Julie's number. My parents' marriage started falling apart. They blamed each other for the Julie situation. Mom said Dad had been too aggressive with the papers. Dad said Mom's greed had been too obvious. They fought constantly when they thought I couldn't hear. Sometimes they'd forget to make dinner because they were too busy arguing. I learned to make sandwiches and eat cereal for meals. It was lonely but peaceful. Then Gabriel showed up again. This time he had a lawyer with him. They sat my parents down and explained the situation. The lawyer had reviewed the police report and the videos from my camera. She said there was enough evidence for a custody challenge. My parents could either agree to a temporary placement with Julie or face a public battle. The lawyer used big words, but the message was clear. Cooperate or lose everything. My parents tried to fight at first. They hired their own lawyer and made accusations about Julie and Gabriel. They said Julie was unstable and Gabriel was a stranger to me. They painted themselves as concerned parents protecting their child, but their lawyer saw the evidence and told them to negotiate. Fighting would mean everything coming out in court. Their reputations would be completely destroyed. The negotiations were tense. I wasn't allowed in the room, but I listened at the door. My parents wanted to keep me but save face. Gabriel and Julie wanted me safe but legal. The lawyers went back and forth for hours. Finally, they reached an agreement. I would spend weekends with Julie and weekdays with my parents. But there were conditions. My parents had to attend counseling and allow supervised check-ins. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. That first weekend with Julie felt like breathing again. She'd rented a small apartment near Gabriel's house. It had 2 bedrooms and a tiny kitchen. She decorated my room with posters and fairy lights. We spent the whole time talking and playing games. She made my favorite foods and let me stay up late. It felt like home in a way my house never did. Going back to my parents was hard. They were sullen and resentful. They followed the agreement but barely. They'd make snide comments about Julie and Gabriel. They'd ask leading questions trying to get dirt on them, but I'd learned to give them nothing. I'd shrug and say everything was fine. They couldn't force me to betray Julie again. The power had shifted and they knew it. Slowly things improved. The counseling helped a little. My parents learned to hide their worst impulses better. They stopped openly threatening and manipulating. They even apologized once, though it felt hollow. Julie got stronger and more independent. She found a job and started building a life. Our weekends became sacred. She'd plan adventures and teach me new things. I learned to cook and garden and stand up for myself. The final confrontation came 6 months later. My parents had been following the rules but planning something. I overheard them talking about moving out of state. They thought if they left, they could break the agreement. They'd take me somewhere Julie couldn't follow. They were researching schools and houses in places far away. The old fear came back. I couldn't let them steal me from Julie again. I told Julie immediately. She didn't panic like I expected. She called Gabriel and the lawyer. They'd been preparing for something like this. The lawyer filed emergency papers with the court. She argued my parents were planning to violate the custody agreement. She had documentation of their past behavior and current intentions. The judge took it seriously. My parents were ordered to appear and explain themselves. Court was scary, even though I didn't have to testify. I sat with Julie and Gabriel while lawyers argued. My parents' lawyer tried to say they just wanted a fresh start. Our lawyer presented evidence of their pattern of control and manipulation. The judge asked my parents directly about their plans. They lied and said it was just an idea, but the judge didn't believe them. She'd seen cases like this before. The ruling changed everything. The judge gave Julie primary custody. My parents got supervised visits twice a month. They couldn't take me out of state or make major decisions. The judge said my safety and well-being came first. My parents were furious but couldn't do anything. Their lawyer told them to be grateful they got any visits at all. The evidence against them was damning. They tried one last manipulation. Outside the courthouse, they cried and begged me to forgive them. They said they'd made mistakes but loved me. They promised to be better parents if I gave them another chance. For a moment, I felt bad. They looked broken and desperate. But then I remembered all the times they'd hurt Julie and me. I remembered the locked doors and the lies. I shook my head and walked away with my real family. Life with Julie and Gabriel was everything I dreamed. Julie adopted me officially a year later. My parents didn't contest it. They'd moved to another town and started over. They sent cards on my birthday, but I didn't respond. I heard they told people I was away at boarding school. They couldn't admit the truth even to themselves, but I didn't care about their lies anymore. I had truth and love and safety. Julie never did have cancer, but she was sick in a different way. Sick from years of neglect and abuse from her family, but she got better with help and support. She showed me that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about who shows up and stays. It's about who loves you when you're difficult and protects you when you're vulnerable. Gabriel became the uncle I never knew I needed. Mrs. Chen stayed our neighbor and friend. Even Mrs. Henderson kept in touch. The fake illness that started everything became a strange blessing. It revealed the truth about my parents and freed us both. Julie's desperate plan for love turned into real connection. She'd wanted them to care about her dying, but instead found people who cared about her living. I learned that sometimes the biggest lies reveal the deepest truths. My parents showed who they really were when they thought Julie was dying. Their greed and cruelty couldn't be hidden anymore. Looking back on those first few months living with Julie and Gabriel, everything felt different. I had my own room at Julie's apartment, and she let me decorate it however I wanted. We went to Target, and I picked out purple bedding and these cool starlights for the ceiling. Gabriel helped us put up shelves for my books. It was the first time anyone asked what I actually wanted my space to look like. School was weird at first. My parents had told everyone I was staying with relatives for a while because of family issues. Some kids asked questions, but I just shrugged and changed the subject. Mrs. Henderson made sure I was doing okay. She'd smile at me in the hallways and sometimes slip an extra cookie in my lunch bag. Having adults who actually cared felt foreign but good. Julie got this job at a dental office doing reception work. She'd leave for work looking professional in her blazer, and her hair growing back in soft wisps. Gabriel helped her get a used car so she didn't have to take the bus. On weekends, we'd go grocery shopping together, and she'd let me pick one junk food item. She taught me how to comparison shop and use coupons, normal stuff that my parents never bothered with. My supervised visits with my parents were awkward. We'd meet at this community center with a social worker watching. Mom would bring cookies she obviously bought from the store but claimed she baked. Dad would ask about school and pretend to be interested in my answers. They'd complain about the supervision and say it wasn't necessary. The social worker would just write notes and remind them of the time when 2 hours were up. One visit, Mom tried to give me this expensive necklace. She said it was a family heirloom from her grandmother. I knew she was lying because I'd seen her buy it at the mall years ago, but I took it anyway and said thanks. She got this hopeful look like maybe I was softening toward them. When I gave it to Julie later, she said I could keep it or donate it. We ended up selling it and using the money for school supplies. Julie started going to therapy every week. Sometimes I'd go too for family sessions. The therapist was this nice lady named Dr. Kim, who had plants everywhere in her office. She helped us talk about the hard stuff, like how I felt guilty for choosing Julie over my parents, or how Julie still sometimes felt like she needed to earn love. Dr. Kim said healing takes time and that was okay. Around Thanksgiving, my parents started pushing boundaries. They sent a letter saying they wanted me for the holiday since it was about family. Their lawyer forwarded it to our lawyer, who shut it down quick. The judge had been clear about the custody arrangement, but they kept trying. They'd send gifts to Julie's apartment with notes about missing their daughter. Julie would ask if I wanted the stuff and I always said no. Then they showed up at my school. I was walking to the bus when I saw Mom's car in the pickup line. My stomach dropped. She rolled down the window and said she just wanted to talk. Said she had something important to tell me. I knew I shouldn't get in the car, but she looked so normal and sad. For a second, I almost did it. Then Mrs. Henderson appeared and asked if everything was okay. Mom drove off without another word. The school called Julie and she came to get me. She wasn't mad, but she was scared. We went straight to the lawyer's office. Turns out my parents had been violating the restraining order by coming to school. Their supervised visits got suspended pending a hearing. They tried to claim it was a misunderstanding, but the security footage showed Mom waiting for 20 minutes. The judge wasn't impressed. After that incident, Gabriel installed a security system at Julie's apartment. Nothing fancy, just some cameras and an alarm. He taught me the code and made sure I knew how to use it. Julie got me a cell phone too, even though I was young for one. She programmed all the important numbers and showed me how to call 911. We practiced safety plans without making it scary, just being prepared. Christmas with Julie and Gabriel was amazing. We got a small tree and decorated it with ornaments we made ourselves. Julie couldn't afford lots of presents, but everything she got me was thoughtful. New books from my favorite series and art supplies and fuzzy socks. Gabriel came over and we made cookies from scratch. Real ones, not store-bought. We burned the first batch, but the second came out perfect. My parents sent a Christmas card with a long letter inside. It talked about forgiveness and second chances. They included a photo of them in front of a Christmas tree looking perfect. I showed it to Julie and she asked what I wanted to do. I thought about it for a while, then threw it in the trash. I didn't need their fake perfect family when I had a real one that actually loved me. Winter turned to spring and life settled into routines. Julie and I had pizza Fridays and library Saturdays. Gabriel taught me to ride a bike in the park. We went to free concerts in the summer and museums when it rained. Julie's hair grew back curly, which she said was weird because it used to be straight. She looked healthy and happy. Nothing like the sick, scared person who showed up at my parents' door. The custody hearings kept happening every few months. My parents would petition for more access and the judge would review everything. Each time they'd present themselves as reformed. They'd bring certificates from parenting classes and letters from their therapist, but they could never explain why they'd locked Julie up or tried to take me from school. The judge saw through their act just like I had. One day, Julie sat me down for a serious talk. She said Gabriel had been offered a job in another state. It was a good opportunity, but would mean moving. She wanted to know how I felt about it. Part of me panicked about leaving everything familiar. But then I realized the only thing keeping us here was my parents, and they weren't really part of my life anymore. I told Julie I'd go wherever she went. The move happened fast. My parents found out and tried to block it legally. They claimed Julie was kidnapping me or alienating me from them, but the judge had already approved the relocation. As long as they could still have their supervised visits by video call, the arrangement stood. They were furious but powerless. For once, the system protected the right people. Our new city was bigger but felt friendlier. Julie found a better job at a medical clinic. I started at a new school where nobody knew my history. I made friends with a girl named Amy who collected rocks, and a boy named David who liked the same books as me. Their parents were normal and boring in the best way. Nobody locked anyone in basements or tried to steal insurance money. Gabriel lived closer now, just a few blocks away. He came over for dinner twice a week and helped with homework. He was dating this teacher named Patricia, who made the best lasagna I'd ever had. She had 2 kids from a previous marriage, and they became like cousins to me. Suddenly, I had this whole extended family that chose to include me. The video calls with my parents lasted about 6 months. They'd sit stiffly in front of their computer and ask surface questions. How was school? What was I reading? Did I like my teachers? I'd give short answers and watch the clock. Sometimes the connection would conveniently fail and we'd have to end early. Eventually, they started missing calls. Then they stopped scheduling them at all. Their lawyer sent a letter saying they were relinquishing parental rights. They wanted to move on with their lives and felt the situation was unhealthy for everyone. Julie asked if I understood what that meant. I did. They were giving up on me officially, but they'd given up on me long before that when they chose money over family. The legal stuff was just paperwork catching up to reality. The adoption finalization happened on a Tuesday. Julie wore her best dress and I wore the outfit we picked out together. Gabriel and Patricia came as witnesses. The judge was different from the custody one, but just as kind. She asked if I wanted Julie to be my legal mother. I said yes louder than I meant to. Everyone laughed, including the judge. She banged her gavel and said we were officially family. We celebrated at this Italian restaurant where they sang when they brought out dessert. The waiter put a candle in my tiramisu and told me to make a wish. I looked around the table at Julie and Gabriel and Patricia and her kids. I couldn't think of anything to wish for. Everything I wanted was already there, so I wished for it to stay that way. For the people who loved me to keep loving me. High school brought new challenges, but Julie was there for all of it. She helped with homework and boy drama and friend fights. She taught me to drive in the clinic parking lot on Sundays. She cried harder than me when I got into college. She helped me pack and move into my dorm. She called every week to check in without being overbearing. She was everything a mom should be. I ran into my former parents once at a grocery store in our old town. I was visiting Mrs. Chen, who still lived next door to their house. They looked older and smaller somehow. Mom's perfect hair was gray at the roots. Dad had gained weight and lost his confident posture. They saw me and froze. I could have walked away, but I didn't. I said hello and asked how they were. Generic politeness, nothing more. They stumbled over their words saying they were fine and asking about me. I told them I was in college studying social work, that Julie was great and Gabriel just got married. They nodded and made appropriate sounds but looked uncomfortable. Finally, Mom asked if I ever thought about them. I said sometimes, but not in the way she probably hoped. We parted without hugging or exchanging numbers. Julie asked about it when I got home. I told her it was strange but not painful, like seeing teachers from elementary school or kids you used to play with. People who were once central to your world but now were just strangers with shared history. She hugged me and said she was proud of how I handled it, that I'd grown into someone who could face the past without being controlled by it. The truth is, my parents did me a favor in their cruelty. They showed me what family shouldn't be. They taught me to recognize manipulation and value genuine love. Their treatment of Julie Julie revealed their true selves in ways nothing else could have. If they'd been normally neglectful, I might have spent years trying to earn their approval. Instead, their extreme behavior freed me to find better. Julie never did get sick for real. She stayed healthy and built a life filled with purpose. She became a supervisor at the clinic and started mentoring other women escaping bad situations. She'd tell them her story about faking cancer to find love and finding it in unexpected places. Some thought she was crazy, but others understood. Sometimes you do desperate things when you're desperate for connection. Gabriel walked me down the aisle at my wedding. Julie fixed my veil and told me I looked beautiful. Patricia's kids were in the wedding party. Mrs. Chen sat in the front row with Mrs. Henderson, who flew in for the occasion. My parents weren't invited and didn't try to come. That chapter was closed and everyone had moved on. The family I chose surrounded me with joy. Years later, when I had my own daughter, I thought about cycles and patterns. How hurt people unless someone breaks the chain. Julie broke it for me by showing up even when my parents pushed her away, by loving me when it would have been easier not to, by fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself. She turned her fake illness into real healing for both of us. I named my daughter Julie after the aunt who became my mother, the woman who shaved her head and starved herself hoping for love, who found it not in the family that rejected her, but in the niece who needed her. We tell her the story sometimes in age-appropriate ways, about how sometimes families are made not born, how love shows up in unexpected ways if you're brave enough to accept it. The original Julie, my Julie, is a grandmother now. She spoils my kids and teaches them card games. She tells them stories about when I was little, but only the good ones. The hard parts are history that doesn't need repeating. We made it through and came out stronger. That's what matters. Not the pain, but the healing. Not the fake illness, but the real love that came after.